Hinckley. Here. Lynch.
Yes.
Rosa.
Yes.
Faringa.
Yes.
Timmons.
Here.
Wensoff.
Here.
White. Here. And Burchett. Get everybody this time?
Okay. At this time, we'll open it up for limited public comment. Yes. Please state your name and address and come to the podium.
Charlene Abernethy, 4312 Westridge Drive, and I know I'm not going to read this whole thing. There's a lot happening here, a lot of changes coming on, as you even say in your in the agenda for tonight, and we're holding you folks as the people who will help Acme to develop into a pleasant place, because I know plenty of people voice the whole issue of jumps corners and how we don't want to look like that. So this is harping back to our wastewater management, our stormwater management. And this is from the January 12, 2012 minutes of that meeting, and about the Dr. Grobel's recommendations on the stormwater management plan is suitable pending on completion of 7 conditions. This is before it would be approved. And one of these is the final engineered drawings of the stormwater treatment. So I am confused, and I don't expect you to answer this, but I am confused at how way back in 2012 these stormwater final engineered drawings were supposed to be submitted. So what does that have to do with you guys? Because you aren't doing that now, but just that I hope that any future developments that happen, that things are followed more closely and not have these, I don't know if it's a slip up or what, but that things be a bit more orderly and organized over what we've experienced with the stormwater management across the street.
Brian.
Brian Kelly, Ridgecrest Road. I wanted to sort of follow on what Charlene said there, that at that January 12, 2012 meeting, there was a motion, and it was unanimously approved. And basically it reads that the commission recommend that the board accept Dr. Grobel's recommendation that the stormwater management plan is suitable pending completion of 7 conditions. And the first condition are final engineered drawings, detailed wetland maintenance monitoring plans, revised stormwater calculations, hydrograph retention times, etc. Obviously the creek monitoring plans are very important here, and those were part, I believe, of these recommendations in the final engineered drawings. I've tried to get those final engineered drawings from the township. I'm told that they're still being produced, that they don't exist. And yet they were due as a condition of approval. And they were due before construction began. They were due before the permit was granted for the site, the land use permit. That land use permit was granted on October 10th of 2013. And as you know, construction has began out there. I filed a FOIA with the township. I couldn't really believe we didn't have these documents. Somehow this had gone forward without having these conditional approval plans. I filed a FOIA with the township asking for them. They couldn't return them to me. They said they don't exist. They're still being produced. And Chris Grobel has also said that he does not have them. They weren't delivered to him. So as part of the process, you routinely approve projects with a few details that haven't been provided at the time of approval. It's a reasonable thing to do. We want to expedite development in the township. We don't want to make a developer come back a month later to hand in a couple pieces of homework. And so the question is, I'd really like to know, as we're going to do more development on that site, how did this happen? How did the site go forward without having these deliverables, very important deliverables? And how do we prevent this from happening again in the future? So those are my questions. Thank you.
Do you have a written statement?
I do.
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you.
Yes.
Jim Hefner, 4050 Bayberry Lane, Williamsburg, or Acme Township. First of all, thank you very much for your time and consideration of the native landscaping proposal ordinance. I really appreciate that. While I was sitting here last Planning Commission meeting, I felt the frustration and the lack of empowerment of the board when Advanced Auto Parts was here with their attorney, and And they said, well, it's the awning type approach to the windows, to the facade. It was only a recommendation or encouraged. And they had their attorney here and they said, well, it's not a requirement, it's just a recommendation or encouraging it, and we're not going to do it. And I, as a citizen of Acme Township, would like to see this board empowered to enforce some aesthetic requirements for commercial development along here. And Steve, I think I heard your frustration, or could feel your frustration too, while you were chairing that meeting, and they made us look totally inept. You know, they just ran right over us. As a citizen of Acme Township, I don't like to have that feeling. Then Jeff, I think you talked about some words could be changed from encouraged or recommend to may be required. And I would ask the board to consider those changes to empower you to control what's going to happen here. We're already seeing, lots of new development, which is very good. But I'd like to be able to have us as citizens and you as a board to be able to control that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim.
Carly, can I make a quick comment on that topic?
Yes.
I've been in contact with Nikki about a sort of a similar issue, and that is storage trailers in the US 31 corridor. The fireworks establishment has a storage trailer out there, and I understand the township has been in discussions with them, and I think I've been told that storage trailers are allowed in that corridor, which I didn't really get when I read our ordinance. I didn't think they were allowed to do that, and I'm very concerned about the proliferation of storage trailers in that corridor. They don't look good. I think it goes against everything we're trying to do with form-based code. So I'm wondering, do we allow this? Is it something we want to allow? Are we at risk of setting a precedent of storage trailers? I also noticed that the dry cleaner, they have a gray trailer. It doesn't have any advertising on it. They have a gray trailer parked out front. So, what tends to happen here is if one business does it, more businesses will do it. Because if I had a business out there, I'd love to have a semi-tractor trailer. I haven't seen one of those yet, but I'd love to have a trailer parked out back to be able to put inventory, stock, and do storage with. So it's part of looking at these things.
Dry cleaner by the Ace Hardware?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's right out front.
There's also the Maid place that has that car they park out.
They moved that, Nikki.
Did they?
They drive it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, all
And
the
I know
time.
that the fireworks trailer got moved
Yeah.
right off the road to the to step in.
Oh, it
certain
was, but
direction.
let me add to that they moved it from the back up to the side into the handicap parking spots. They kind of inched it back up, and then on the first of the year for the New Year holiday, they put it right out front and center again for several days there to use it as advertising again, which they say it is not advertising. So, anyway, thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll close public comment at 7:12. Jim, you and Steve are up.
I'll turn it over to you. Planning Commission, there is a handout that I made copies of this presentation, and Jim is from the Michigan Land Use Institute. He's going to present this program that he's been working on for a while. He's also been presenting to local agencies. He's also been working with the tribe on this. And the tribe is very involved in this and wants to see this go forward because we're the end destination on this line. So someday we'd like to have some type of passenger rail line from Traverse City up to Williamsburg. There's that natural turnaround that they have already built in Williamsburg, so they can turn around and go back, and eventually maybe even go into Braun or downstate. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim. He'll present this, and then we'll have a little time for some questions.
Sure, great, and yeah, I don't mind if there's questions or comments while I'm presenting. Yeah, feel free to jump right in. I know sometimes this gets a little exciting. So, just thanks for giving me a few minutes on the agenda to talk about this project. As Steve said, we're really looking at how we can reinstate passenger rail from Southeast Michigan up to Traverse City, but also how can we develop some kind of train or trolley service on this 11-mile stretch of tracks that extends between Traverse City and Williamsburg. I don't have a specific request for this board at this time. My objective is to give you an overview of what we're working on in this project. You'll see we're very early in this process. So no request for action at this time, but I just want to give you an overview and talk about why we're talking about this right now and why we think this is a great idea for right now, and also talk about some of our next steps. So really want to hear some questions and feedback on this whole process, since the tracks do run right through Acme Township, the south side of Township. So just by way of context here, this is a map of Michigan's existing rail lines, and our focus right now is on this stretch between Ann Arbor and the Traverse City-Williamsburg area. Once the tracks head north from Ann Arbor, they stop into a few small towns, Alma, Mount Pleasant, and Cadillac, and then they extend actually all the way up to the Petoskey area. And once they get to the Traverse City area, once they get to the depot right in Traverse City, it creates a T. So the T extends from Braun and all the way to Williamsburg, as Steve mentioned. There's a unique set of circumstances around this set of tracks. This is one of the only lines that's still owned by the Michigan Department of Transportation. And that's unique because back in the 70s and 80s, the state was trying to get rid of all of its existing rail lines that it still owns. It was a cost-saving measure, and they just didn't think that the state should be responsible for maintaining all the rail tracks around the state. They did, however, preserve this lines. The department had the foresight to really look at some point in the future, we may want this line again for freight traffic and maybe perhaps someday passenger traffic again. So they did maintain the right-of-way along these tracks, and they did keep the tracks intact. Right now, the tracks, about 95% of this stretch of tracks is leased by a company called Great Lakes Central. And that's significant because Great Lakes Central purchased the tracks about a decade ago with the intention of someday converting it back to passenger rail. Right now, they are primarily a freight rail operator, but they are learning a lot more about passenger rail on that passenger side. You'll hear about that when I talk a little bit about Ann Arbor. So this unique set of circumstances is part of the reason why we continue to think that putting in passenger rail on these tracks is a good idea. There are very many places around the country where the State Department of Transportation still maintains that right-of-way and set of tracks within their state. So a couple of the reasons why we're talking about this right now. Rail is one of the highest priorities for the Michigan Department of Transportation right now. They used to focus primarily on moving cars and building highways, but they're over the past 5 to 6 years, they've been making a major shift, and right now rail is one of their highest priorities, both the freight side and the passenger side. In 2012, they developed a state rail plan, which really outlined a set of investment strategies needed to modernize the state's rail system. Since then, they've accelerated a number of projects. They're making major investments and making major upgrades to the rail line between Chicago and Detroit. Once that project is completed, that's going to be one of the fastest passenger rail lines in the entire country. The trains will be able to travel at about 110 miles per hour, and it's going to cut the travel time between Detroit and Chicago down from 5.5 hours to 4 hours. So that's a significant project. MDOT's working on commuter lines in the Ann Arbor area, two lines, one that's going to connect the Howell-Brighton area down to Ann Arbor, and then a commuter line that will connect Detroit and Ann Arbor. Those projects are expected to be completed within the next 3 to 5 years. So major investments there. They're a big part of the project to put in a streetcar in Detroit, the M1 streetcar line. Then they're talking about 2 rail line expansion projects. One is they're doing a feasibility study this year on connecting Detroit, Lansing, Grand Rapids, and Holland in a coast-to-coast train line. And then next year, they'll be looking at expanding from southeast Michigan, the Ann Arbor area, up to the Traverse City area with passenger rail. So you're seeing a lot of development there, a lot of expansion, looking into a lot of expansion. So as you can see, rail is a high priority for MDOT. which is much different than it was 10 years ago. There's a lot of skill up here for trains. I'm sure you've seen it all. You know, I couldn't believe it when I moved up here from Grand Rapids, the amount of enthusiasm there is around trains. Not only did it come out of the Grand Vision process as sort of an interest among a lot of people up here, but when the Michigan Environmental Council and the Michigan Association of Railroad Passengers went around the state 3 years ago to many different communities and asked people, you know, what do you want to see with passenger rail in the state? The number one priority that came out of that process from the entire state was a passenger connection to Traverse City, both from places outside of Traverse City, but within Traverse City as well. So, in fact, more people attended the Traverse City Forum than anywhere else around the state. So you can see the enthusiasm there is around trains up here, and we've heard it all a lot over the past few years. There's also a lot of development potential that could complement a rail line if we were to put something up here, both by the depot and the 8th Street area. That's planned for some walkable type development, but also the development plans on this area in Acme and around the Williamsburg area. Master plans call for walkable type development, and perhaps at some point or at some level a train line, some kind of train or trolley could complement some of that growth. So what do we envision? Well, the research that we've done and the conversations that we've had with the Michigan Department of Transportation, the Federal Railroad Administration, rail experts all over the country, we have concluded that it's realistic to say that we could have a passenger rail connection from Ann Arbor to Traverse City within the next 10 years. A number of things have to happen in order for that to come to fruition. Number one is that feasibility study that I mentioned, which is going to happen next year through the Michigan Department of Transportation. They're going to look at, okay, if we do put in passenger service, how much is this going to cost? What kind of service are we talking about? What kind of track upgrades do we need to invest in order to make that happen? And we're also probably going to be running some excursion trains from Southeast Michigan up here, probably first around some of the major events like Cherry Festival or the Film Festival. We're already talking to MDOT and Great Lakes Central about running some excursion trains, probably not this year, but for 2016. And then that could expand to weekend service, and then at some point, the Michigan Department of Transportation says that, you could have daily service up to the Traverse City area, depending on price and how much it's going to cost to make some of these investments. So, but they are seriously considering that. So, very exciting. 10 years is a long time for a lot of people. What we've determined, and again with some of the chats that we've had with the Michigan Department of Transportation, was that one small step we could take, which could be achievable, is to look at what can we do with this 11-mile stretch from here from Traverse City to Williamsburg. So we did produce this study that I think is in front of you right here, which looked at, what is the potential with these tracks? Sometimes you see freight cars on them. Some places they don't really look like they're in that great a condition. We wanted to answer a lot of the questions that were hanging out there, like, okay, we have this asset in our community. What can we do with this asset? Can we run trains? What happened with the dinner train? Would a trolley work on these tracks? So we really wanted to answer some of those questions. And what we found out was that, really what people envision is sort of this, what you would see in big cities. So light rail or commuter trains. And what we determined through our study was that, we really don't have the density up here to support any kind of light rail or commuter trains just yet. The safety requirements that you need to put in place on the tracks and the boarding stations are just way too costly for a region as this. However, we found with communities that were about Traverse City size or even a little bit smaller, we found that one low-cost achievable first step is to put in some kind of tourist train or a tourist trolley. So we did look at a couple of communities that found out that putting in some kind of tourist trolley really was a boost for tourism and for economic development and worked well both some of the visitors to their areas, but also some of the everyday workers, especially workers around the tourism-related industries. We looked at Astoria, Oregon, which had a 3-mile stretch of freight rail tracks that was just sitting there along the Columbia River. And a group of people got together about 15 years ago and spent about $40,000 refurbishing an old trolley, and now they run a trolley on this stretch of tracks at a pretty low cost. $55,000 a year is pretty low for running something that works for people on tracks. And they actually make up that money through fare box revenue, and they only charge $1 a ride. And they use some special event, they raise money through special events as well, and some special private charter operations. Charlotte, North Carolina was a place that was pretty interesting in our research, where they had a set of freight tracks. It's a larger city than Traverse City, but it's the same kind of situation. They had an existing set of freight tracks, and what they did was refurbish an old trolley about 15 years ago and ran it up and down the tracks, and it worked for a lot of the commuters. And eventually they replaced it and put in full-blown light rail instead of these vintage trolleys that they had going for about 10 years. Once they built up the interest and demand, they were able to expand the service into something a little bit more modern and practical. Some of the European towns that we've looked into, instead of having a locomotive and passenger cars, and instead of having just a vintage trolley, they use what's called diesel multiple units, or DMUs, which are these self-propelled streetcar, light rail looking vehicles that can go back and forth along tracks. They use these in towns that are similar size to Traverse City, but pretty unique looking, something that we think could fit in with the character of Traverse City. It's not that big locomotive type, but it's also not that vintage trolley that may not be as useful for people. So we do have someone looking for vehicles like this. They have some in the US. Most of them need to be refurbished, but Great Lakes Central, the company who leases the tracks, has that capability of refurbishing cars. So, ideally it's something that would be an attraction for people, attracting people to this area to ride it. But again, it should be something that works for, perhaps a portion of the residents, especially ones that live out here that need to get into Traverse City and into the 8th Street area. But it could be very useful for some of the hotels along US 31. What we're hearing from them is that, they have a lot of people who are coming up here and visiting the area that are taking their bikes with them. And instead of driving into town when they need to get into Traverse City, they're using the TART trail behind the hotels and taking that into downtown to avoid traffic and parking and probably DUIs. So especially around Cherry Fest and Film Fest, people are taking their bikes into town from a lot of those hotels along US 31. So what if they had another option? Instead of the front door being US 31, what if we had an additional front door instead of this being the back door into town? And I showed you that image before of places where there's been a bike trail next to rail lines, and it's really worked out for a lot of communities, especially waterfront communities. Let's see. So what's next for us? Again, very early in the process. There are still a lot of questions out there that we hope to answer this year. The tracks right now need some work and some upgrades in order to carry passengers on any trains. Michigan Department of Transportation is saying it's going to be roughly $2 million to get them into shape where you could carry passengers. And so we're looking at what are the specifics with that. A lot of that has to do with some of the crossings. It crosses about 18 to 19 roads, if you can believe that. So a lot of those crossings need to be safe if you're going to have any kind of passengers traveling on the trains. We're looking at the ownership structure for this. Is this something that Beta could operate? Is it something that some nonprofit would operate? Those questions remain. We think that nonprofit is the best operating structure to put in place for something like this. They've used a nonprofit structure for the M1 streetcar in Detroit, but that makes it so that you're able to raise private funding for something like this, but also take advantage of any type of public grants that may be out there for a project like this. We need to look at, where to get equipment. We talked about those DMUs and different vintage streetcars that could be out there for something like this, but someone has to go out there and find those, and that's what we hope to do over the next couple of years, working with a consultant to come in and really look at what equipment is out there and what could be used on this set of tracks. Stops, where the stops are located. Obviously you want something at one end and the other, but where do you stop whatever it is in between? You have one stop that would capture a number of those hotels along US 31. Obviously you want to have a timely connection between one end and the other, and you don't want to have too many stops where the people who are riding it don't have a reliable time for getting to their destination. So all those things need to be considered, and we just do not have those answers yet. What I'm working on right now is trying to raise some awareness around the idea, and we're doing that through a lot of the presentations that we're doing, as Steve mentioned, but also on February 16th, we're having an event where we're going to bring all these ideas together at the State Theater. We're going to have a panel discussion. We'll probably have somebody come up from Ann Arbor to talk about their commuter projects down there, and hopefully have someone from Charlotte come up and talk about their tourist line that they had on their freight rail tracks, and talk about what steps they took to get that going and why that was important for them. Hopefully we'll have a clearer timeline for what we can expect to happen over the next 5 to 10 years with this project. I think I'll have a month to be able to develop that timeline, and I'm going to present it there at this event, and we'll show some kind of movie that's related to trains and building communities around trains too. So those plans are coming up. One way to draw attention to this will be the upcoming construction. I'm sure, I think it's certain parts where people will be sitting in traffic when US 31 is down to one lane. I think you can see some of the tracks. So while we probably won't be able to have passengers on the tracks at that point, what if we could show some kind of billboard or something that would draw attention to the tracks and the asset that we have there. So people, instead of looking at the traffic and looking at the car in front of them, these are some of the views that they could have from the tracks. So I think that's it. Anyway, exciting things ahead. That was just an overview, and I hope to keep you updated on this project. Hopefully when I'm back, I'll have a lot more information for you and a lot more progress with this project too.
Any questions for Jim? I'll be in touch with him also, because I'll be attending these meetings also, and I'll report back to the commission.
Jim, that rail is owned by MDOT, stops in Williamsburg, so there is nothing beyond that?
That's correct. There are no tracks that exist between Williamsburg and Kalkaska. In fact, I'm not sure even what the status is with the right-of-way and the land between there. I'm not really sure who owns that, but yeah, the tracks do not exist.
It stops, there's a turnaround there, and that's where it stops.
Yeah, in downtown Williamsburg.
There's a
You say downtown Williamsburg, like it's,
There's nothing in
That's like
Williamsburg, but
saying-
there's a spur there. The post office.
right, okay, so there, I wrote it down, like Williamsburg Place, and I'm thinking, is anyone doing like placemaking activities there?
It's in their master plan, actually. It
Is
says,
it?
preserve
this
the
is-
rail corridor for future passenger rail.
What about, one thing about Kalkaska is that there are people that would like to live in this area, but they can't afford it, so they live in Kalkaska County. We have a rail system that goes to Williamsburg, and that's it. So it seems like that's an opportunity for transportation for those people who would like to get a job.
Sure. Adding tracks where they don't exist right now is very expensive. That's why I say that MDOT had the foresight to preserve the tracks between southeast of Michigan and Traverse City, but places where tracks don't exist, it becomes very cost prohibitive to add tracks. So I think with people coming from Kalkaska to Traverse City, we do a lot of work with Beta and how it coordinates its transit service with Kalkaska's transit agency, but that can always improve, you know, the connection there between Kalkaska and Traverse City.
Another question about the trolley cars. Is there a length of track that trolley cars can run on better than short distances? Or is there a limit where, do you say trolley cars can't do this anymore? It's gotta be something bigger, more?
You know, typically you see
Durable.
them on anywhere from, you know, 4 to 5 miles or less. It would be a stretch for 11 miles, but it depends on how it's powered, and, you know, we don't have those answers yet. You know,
How do they power up?
mostly when you see vintage trolleys, they're powered by overhead
Oh,
wires and electricity. However, you know, as technology changes, there are so many ways that you can power a streetcar now, that we're looking into. Diesel generators and things like that can allow them to go a little bit farther.
So is this whole project funded by MDOT?
So this is just us at the Institute, and we're not we're not transportation engineers, we're just putting the idea out there and you
What is
know,
an MDOT project then? If it's put in place, it would be an MDOT project?
It would be, yes, they're responsible for the infrastructure side. As far as operations go, that's where I say, you know, we have to answer those questions, whether that would be some kind of nonprofit that manages it, or Beta, you know, they were interested, I presented at their board, and, you know, they said they'd be interested in a project like this. I'm not sure if, when it comes down to it, if that would actually happen or not, if that's the best way to go, so.
Thank you.
Well, on those trolley cars, the places you showed, I don't believe they have winners like we have up here, do
That's what I was thinking.
Astoria, Oregon, shuts theirs down January and February.
they? Right, so.
So
I mean,
there's-
I
it's
guess
seasonal.
what I'm thinking of, like for Beta or something like that, maybe you want to run year round, I would think.
Sure,
And
sure. Yeah, we'd have to, to keep costs down, it would be seasonal. Because as soon as you get into, you know, keeping the equipment warm in the winter and,
Keeping the
Thanks.
tracks clear.
yeah, keeping the tracks clear, those things all have to be considerations.
Tom could do that.
Huh?
Tom could do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, no.
That makes me think it'd be much more of a tourist novelty
If-
than
Mhm.
something where Beta is using it for commuting then.
Right.
If you're like, well, it's snowing, we have to stop.
Mhm. Right, right.
It's a good east to west alternative. That's the big issue right now, is there's only one way to go east and west, at least the main corridor.
But really the point here is, you know, starting small, starting with something that would be probably seasonal, summers only, maybe even weekends to start out with, and then build the service from there as
They
interest
really
and
tried
demand
to-
grows.
I forget how long ago, from Williamsburg to Traverse. And it worked for an hour, for about 2 weeks, I think, for people riding that.
The dinner train? Is that
No, it wasn't a dinner train.
Oh, okay.
This one went from Williamsburg to Traverse, not Traverse to Cadillac, I think is one of the, or someplace down there.
If you're running on a trolley on these tracks, the lifetime of those tracks are longer? Or there's yearly maintenance, I would guess, but something light will keep the tracks in better shape longer?
That's correct. I mean, that affects both things. Both, you know, how much is needed to upgrade the tracks and, you know, the life that those upgrades would stand. So the lighter the vehicle, the better, you know, as far as cost and overall maintenance and the length of time that the tracks are preserved. So once you get to heavier vehicles, you need more infrastructure upgrades.
So if you rode a passenger train from Ann Arbor to like the depot neighborhood, essentially is where you'd be dumping these people off,
Sure.
what would they do once they get there?
That's-
Because it's not like the airport where you can get a rent-a-car or like where would they go?
So that's another, you know, major consideration. If you're able-bodied, you could walk from 8th Street to downtown.
But most of the hotels are not right downtown.
That's
You'd
right.
assume you'd be staying. So then do you end up with a bunch of shuttles coming in, or can they, if we had the passenger trolley, they could transfer to that, but
It's an opportunity, Beta has already said, you know, they'll align its routes with, you know, know, any kind of train service that we have on the tracks. But it's an opportunity for shuttle service. It's an opportunity for hopefully in the future some kind of, there'll be a car share or bike share service within Traverse City. Because this isn't going to happen next year. It's going to be a little while where we could advance some of the, some of that last mile.
So, and then you were saying
type of infrastructure.
the excursions, so you're gonna do those like next year for weekends? How can you do that if the track from Ann Arbor to Traverse City is not in like passenger quality? Because I know I did the Cadillac to Traverse City ride with you guys
Oh, okay.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was really fun, but it was kind of shaky and it was sort of slow. And so I guess that's, how do you do that then?
So the main line, basically,
Like lots of
98%
disclosures.
of the tracks from Ann Arbor to Cadillac are actually in really good shape. Passengers can travel 40 to 50 miles per hour because they still use that for a lot of freight traffic. Cadillac to Traverse City is where a lot of the tracks are still in question on their condition. So that's where some of those upgrades are needed.
I thought the whole thing was like that, and I was like, oh,
No, see, that's,
takes Dramamine.
that trip was Cadillac. I think we went all the way to.
We got
Soccer
up down
fields
by
and-
like Keystone, yeah,
Yeah.
and like just pulled up, and everyone was like, "Get out of the train," and we're like, "Huh?"
Yep.
I mean, it was a really pretty, very cool ride. But I thought the whole track was like that.
Yeah, some
Okay.
of the upgrades are still needed, mostly
Okay.
around Traverse City. Yeah.
Debbie Downer from her dream, I thought.
No, I mean, well, I obviously support rail. I took my life in my own hands and got on that train, but like, it was very cool though, and a lot of people went. It was very, very fun.
If you hike the Bunker Hill section between Lautner and Bunker Hill here, and you look at the track, you can see how it waves, and you can see how the ties are literally falling apart. You wouldn't want to walk on the ties because your feet would literally break them. They're like that. I can't believe freight trains can actually run there, but they do.
Yeah.
But didn't they do a bunch of upgrading of that track last
They
summer?
replaced some of the ties, those wood
Uh-huh.
things that keep the line in shape. But yeah, they're in the lowest condition possible actually for rail lines.
Jim, what about the other, what I'll call bedroom communities, okay? We're talking not just tourist trolleys, but maybe commuter rail. And obviously the track's already there from Kingsley into Traverse City, which there's a lot of traffic that goes out on Garfield every day, in and out of Traverse City. And then Grand, Interlochen, I think the rail still exists there. And then also back when I was somewhat involved with the Leno Trail Association, Paul Brennan talked about that they were preserving that corridor for some future rail possibilities. And they purchased that corridor. I don't know whether that's still an option, but from Sutton's Bay into Traverse City, has the Michigan Land Institute, Land Use Institute, investigated those options?
So with Sutton's Bay, again, the challenge is putting in new tracks. I mean, even if the right-of-way is still there, adding new railroad tracks, it just is so expensive. It's almost just cost prohibitive, no matter where. I mean, unless you're in a major city. Grand to Traverse City is something that we did look at, and I think should continue looking at because the tracks are still there. They go all the way to between Grand and Interlochen area. One challenge there is the bridge in Traverse City over the Boardman where the lake turns into the river. You've seen that. It was built in 1870 or something probably. So I think for liability reasons, that bridge would have to be replaced, which I think would get pretty costly. There are no bridges between here and Williamsburg, or I'm sorry, Traverse City and Williamsburg. So that's why we thought that this was a little bit more realistic. I don't want to set an expectation with people that, that it is a possibility to go up to Grand, and I think it is going to be very expensive to get over that bridge with passengers. But then, again, with the Ann Arbor to Traverse City, I think that's where you're going to have that more, if it's daily train service, it is a locomotive, passenger cars, and not that trolley service. Trolley service would be what we're talking about up here. I know it's two projects that I'm talking about, and I kind of go back and forth between the two, but they are separate. So Traverse City and Ann Arbor is going to be a different service than the Traverse City up to Williamsburg.
The Ann Arbor Traverse City would not be a nonprofit, it would be,
Well, that
could be a nonprofit,
could be, yes.
but you would, I mean, you'd have to hop on the train, what, at the train station in Ann Arbor?
Yes, yep. And no, that still has to be looked at. But there's one in Ann Arbor.
There's Amtrak in Ann Arbor.
Is that right?
Yes.
There's one, yeah,
Yep.
it's in Ann
Yeah,
Arbor.
Yeah,
down by
that-
the Gandy Dancer.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then the one that he's talking about, that would go from Ann Arbor to Howell, they're coordinating right now, part of the SUNCOG studies, we're working with U of M Hospital and with the university on developing a hub. Because that's where a lot of the traffic is coming, to develop a hub, so there may be actually a second depot that they build that's separate from the Amtrak. Because right now,
But
between-
these tracks go to the, both tracks go.
Yes, they can
A little bit
connect.
of both, yes. Yep. And that
So-
connects into that Chicago to Detroit.
That's the old one,
So the one coming from Ann Arbor up to Traverse City, is that gonna be year-round?
We still have to look at that. That will be probably determined in this feasibility study that MDOT will be looking into next year.
Do they currently take freight on it year-round?
They do, yes.
That helps. At least. Interesting. Okay. Any other questions?
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you for
Yeah.
coming.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for printing out this report.
I think that was Steve, actually. That's Steve.
Steve, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. We will move on
You
to
can
an.
have Trey's computer if you want.
We'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Everyone,
I make a motion to approve the agenda as it stands.
we have a motion. Do we have a support? Who is that next? Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor of approval of the agenda as presented, say aye. All opposed, say no. At this time with the agenda, are there any conflicts of interest on tonight's festivities? Hearing none. Consent calendar.
Purpose is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together for one board motion without discussion. A request to remove any item for discussion later in the agenda from any board, or any member of the board, staff, or public shall be granted. We're going to do receive and file of draft unapproved minutes, Township Board, December 2nd, 2014, and special meetings, November 25th and December 11th, as well as a zoning administrator monthly report dated December 18th, and action on draft unapproved minutes of the planning commission minutes of December 8th.
Would anybody from the commission, staff, or public like any items removed from the consent calendar? Hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Do you have do you have a motion, we have support? Any discussion on approval of the consent calendar? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. There's no correspondence or public hearings. We're gonna move right into new business. As a quick note, I wanna apologize for not being here last month. I got the flu that it seems like everybody is getting. So I was being nice to you guys by not coming. Now let's move on. I felt really bad, but you didn't want me here. Okay, John, do you want to talk about the Milton Township Master Plan?
I can, yes, we did get a copy through by Milton Township of their master plan. I took a look at it. The goals and objectives are very similar to what we have in our master plan. There is no boundary with Milton Township that's contiguous, that touches Acme Township, so there was really no conflicting land use issues. I don't see any reason why we would not. My recommendation is to basically pass on to their planning commission that we have no conflicts with anything that they've had in the master plan relative to Acme Township. I prepared a letter addressed to the chairperson. My recommendation is that Carly would, as the chairperson, submit a formal letter to Milton Township saying, thank you very much for the opportunity to review the plan. Our planning commission finds no conflicts, and leave it at that.
Any questions for John? If not, at this time, I would entertain a motion to authorize me to submit such letter.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. You guys are just going back and forth. All right, we have a motion, we have a support. Any discussion on a motion authorizing me to write a letter to the Milton Township Planning Commission that there were no comments regarding their final draft plan? Okay, all in favor? Say aye. All opposed, say no. Electronic signs for discussion. Nikki, I believe?
Yeah, sure. You all have a picture of the present Shell gas station sign. We had a sign request that's attached that has gone nowhere because our ordinance does not allow the digital electronic signs even for gas station gas prices. So they wrote a letter to you that also is attached. This has come to me like, I don't know, we have 2 gas stations. It's come up probably 2 times for each gas station. And, you know, I've had to tell them no. However, I think, you know, it's time that we discuss having electronic signs. They're not presently allowed. And, you know, for the convenience, the nice look, they've got some samples here. They show you the present sign with those numbers that they hang up there with the big pole, and then the digital sign. It'd be non-moving except when the price has to change for the gas. So they would like to upgrade their signs, and want to know your thoughts about it.
Question.
Yeah.
There's a lot of technical jargon in here about the brightness of these signs. Are these signs pretty much all the same regardless of who you get them from? I mean, is there like a national standard for these kinds of things? Does the highway department put out a standard for these kinds of things? I mean, we're certainly not the first ones.
All over the board.
It is? Really?
So how do we make sure that all electronic signs meet our dark sky ordinance and that they would all go down to like, what did they say, 20% in the evening?
You'd have to put the,
We could write it in.
you have to write it in.
So right now, I'm just asking for gas signs, gas pricing signs for electronic signs, unless you'd like to amend the entire ordinance to allow
So then
any
the
static
sign,
electronic signs.
the sign 7.4.3, the proposed amendment just talks about signs. Is that actually, is the whole amendment only referring to gas station signs? Or do we need to write it in there that we're only allowing electronic signs at gas stations and not at every place?
Right, this is all up for discussion.
Okay.
Not having a hearing tonight, it's just for discussion. Your thoughts?
I guess I'm in favor of having electronic signs at gas stations as long as they meet standards to be dimmed at night. And I don't really support them, I guess, at every single business, but I guess I would also look at the fact that maybe some businesses, like the gas station, or the car wash that changes their sign, and other places that might have to use the poles, if we're talking about safety, I guess I would support them maybe at other places, but I would wanna make sure that we kept it so it wasn't gonna be really obnoxious.
Do we have any currently in the area that we could compare this particular one?
Speedway.
Potentials? Potentials hardware. They just put one up.
Did they?
Yeah.
Isn't that the, isn't the place that has all the funny, no?
Yeah.
Yeah? They put all the really
There's a
funny
show.
stuff.
No, that's still there.
Oh, okay,
That's
yes,
Roy's.
yes, yes.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
I haven't seen it.
There's also a new show on, somewhere in Traverse City.
I think down on 14th, didn't they just put one in? Okay,
All you gotta do is go by 3 Mile there, right there. You got it.
Yeah.
okay, other questions?
Oh, Madam Chair,
Yes.
just a question, if you're looking at how amenable is the planning commission that if you want to allow a business to have an electronic sign, that they have to do a ground sign?
Well, I have a few questions. One is, I don't know where this would all go, but like, I think that electronic signs should be like static as far as what is on them. And like, there would be no deviating from that, because there's a new sign on my drive into Traverse City that makes me crazy. And I also think they should be monocolor. I don't think it should be some big, fancy, almost like a billboard production. That's just my opinion. This would be like straight up, we need to get some numerals or some words out there, because I think it's very distracting. My other question, and I know we're never zoning by looking at a specific application. I know that, Jeff. But with this one, they are retrofitting the existing sign, it looks like. So it's gonna be just as tall as that bad boy is big. So my thought would be, if you wanna, like John just kind of, I think, hinted at, if you wanted to get this nice electronic sign that keeps you from having a guy out there with a pole changing, that it would be something that conforms with our current ordinance, because I'm fairly certain that that sign wouldn't fly today.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point, because when this first came out, we talked about a change to that sign and whether that would be, whether a change to that sign would require them to meet the current existing zoning ordinance for signs, the height standards. And I don't know if the square footage face exceeds that or not, I don't know. And when we first talked about it, I said, well, it was, if you have an existing sign, for the most part, if you, redo your sign, it's not a new permit, it's not a new, it could be a new permit depending on what it is, but it's not a new, if you're non-conforming, you can continue that non-conformance, I should say. However, though, this is adding a new type of sign, so I have to think about that, but it may be that if you wanted to, change your Shell gas station sign to add electronic, whatever that they call that, gas prices, that would be considered a new sign, or at least that part, if you want to add those to it, it has to meet the sign ordinance. So that's an interesting point, that I guess it depends on how significant the change is too that you allow. If it goes into talking about what John suggested, potentially ground mounted, if that's where you wanted to go, and limits, and you are allowing a new type of sign, so that's a new sign. It wouldn't be a non-conforming use at that point.
Now with this specific request, they were going to keep the sign framing and then just plug in a box between the two posts.
Under our
And that's
current
what I'm saying.
sign ordinance though,
It may
how
be-
much space would a gas station get for their sign? Because in my head, I think it's probably,
Well, it's,
Well, they've got the measurement on this one.
but if they came in as a completely new application and said, we're a gas station, we want a
It's the
sign.
same, yeah.
what's
6
the
foot tall
height?
now, 32 square feet.
6 foot
6
tall,
foot
32
tall
square.
in the new district.
Yeah, it's in It's in the new district, 6 foot
I
tall.
just don't know off the, can it, does it have to be ground mounted though?
It says 6 feet high, they could have a little bit of a pole and have it on top. It's
Oh,
not-
no, I get
But
what
no
you're
more than
saying.
6 feet high.
No.
Like
yeah.
the total height of
Total height
the,
is
not
6
the
feet.
sign face. Okay. Questions? Comments, thoughts?
I might be in favor of it just being gas stations, but not electronic signs, just everywhere.
Okay.
So not like the hotels when they're changing prices of rooms?
Right.
See, I think that would be a good use of the sign, just like you see at Cherry.
I always love to know what it costs to
I know,
stay at
right?
Cherry Tree.
See it drop all
Every
down.
day I'm like, it's only $69, why am I sleeping at my house? Yeah,
Until Saturday comes.
right. Or President's Day weekend.
It may be a good idea to think about that. I mean, vacancy signs, you know, some of them are, some of the
Vacancy
vacancy signs I know are electronic like that.
Mhm.
I don't know what
Now,
else
if
is
you have them
appropriate or
put that at a
inappropriate.
6-foot height, total, maybe I'm wrong, but I think about the winter time, you know, right now especially, and that snowplow comes through there, I can see them bulbs being popped quicker than heck.
LEDs don't pop, actually.
They won't break.
Plastic.
Very hard to
Okay.
break, they're not sensitive
Then
to.
my other question is, I know they're putting the LEDs in stoplights and such. They don't create enough heat to melt the snow. So now all of a sudden, they just got a white wall there. Or, as you go through, is that light changed or not? Which is something that they're finding with stoplights nowadays. So, with them putting it on the ground, I guess I can see the thought of it, to have it down low, but
Yeah.
yet
Well,
practicality.
most signs though, 6 feet high, all they have is like a name for what they are.
Right,
Gas
and
station
below that's
signs
gonna
are
be
so
the-
uniquely weird because they display information on them.
Right.
So,
Because they're gonna have the shells
Mhm.
sign there, and below it's gonna be
right,
the
down
price.
in the snow, yeah.
Down
So
in
if
the
we
snow.
change the sign ordinance.
Yes. Form-based code is, you have to meet all the square footage requirements that are in the current sign ordinance, except the height has to be less than 6 feet tall.
Okay.
That's what you, and we'd have to see whether, how far back from the right of way there, to see how much, you know, it's.
That sign is
I know it-
right on the road.
Barney Castle,
Just a
one
second.
in Del Rapids,
Oh, what?
sits
Just
back.
don't want to see us,
But
we,
yet that's higher than 6
drive
feet
down and
tall.
see just a bunch of
Right
electronic
place.
signs.
And they're
Yeah.
pushing them as high as you can.
Well,
I don't,
Visibility.
realistically though, the cost of putting in one of these signs, I think would prohibit most businesses from investing in them. They're really expensive. So I don't see like we say yes to this and every little motel on our strip goes out and gets an electronic sign. I
how
don't
many
think they have
motels
it.
have we got on our street?
Well, like 3, 4. I don't know.
That's changing.
Right. But, okay. Other comments?
Well, John said they were all over the place as far, I thought that meant price-wise. too.
No, I'm talking about regulations. There's no really set national standard for interior lit signs. Almost every community manages them a little bit differently.
Okay.
So,
They are all expensive.
yes.
I think it would be nice if the sign was only lit while they're open.
It's in our ordinance presently.
Yeah. Do the gas stations leave lights on at night? Like always in bed.
Riches is,
I'm always in bed by 9.
Yes, shut up an hour after.
Okay.
at the Shell station, it'll close down anyways.
Yeah, right.
I would be in favor if we allowed other businesses to have them, to do like if there was a hotel, they could have you know, one strip a certain size that just displayed like rooms were whatever, or vacancies or no vacancies or whatever it was. So it wasn't like flashing lights and big huge laid out letters, but just an informational, you know, strip. I would be in favor of that. That's about as far as I'd wanna go other than gas stations.
That's pretty much what we see though, if you're going down East Bay. I mean, you're not seeing a big flashing.
Not yet, but you never know when it's.
Exactly.
10 years from now, or as businesses start to come in and all signs are becoming new, they might just go, oh, we're getting electronic and it's gonna be whatever.
Or as LEDs get cheaper.
Yeah.
I think we've got an opportunity to limit it to gas stations right now and address the other issues secondarily to that. I would be in favor of gas stations only, and I was also say, to me, it's very important that both Shell and I think Rich too are using about the same size numerals in there. Now, I know Shell's talking about retrofitting that, but I think the language should include the size of the pricing, the numbers themselves, as opposed to what you're, because light, size, appearance, a number of things. If you look at the mutual sign, where was that? Off the end of the peninsula, they used the numerals in there this big.
Oh, the right by the cup, the
Yeah.
KFC?
Yeah, and the Kenchels went that way too, didn't they? Didn't they go to large numeral?
Which one is that?
It would
It's a
be,
BP sign, yeah, it's
Hampton
a
and-
large, it's larger
Yeah.
than,
Yeah, I think
it's
we've got an
larger than,
opportunity. Let's-
Okay,
Think of where we're gonna have gas stations. They're gonna be right here at the intersection.
okay,
That's where they're gonna be.
that's a good point.
I agree. That, there are standards for that.
For how
The
big
size-
they can be and
The
still be
size based on
legible
the
and.
big size based on the speed of the highway.
Okay.
There's recommended standards.
So there is, there
To
are.
that, to the height.
They're AM.
There is. Okay. I know, Marcy knows, I have this thing about grammar. Okay, any other comments? Because I think that we've had enough. Does anybody, yes.
Personally, I think that the sign should be higher than 6 feet. I think it should be, the bottom of the sign might want to be 6 feet. Because I think, you know, you're gonna have traffic coming down the road, people are, if they're thinking about buying gas, and this is the last chance before you hit the road to Detroit, they're gonna be looking at, you know, they wanna see that sign. And if there's other traffic going by, they may not be able to see the numbers on the sign. If they're down lower than 4 feet or 5 feet, you won't be able to see them, especially if there's any snow. They'll be buried. Now, if it was me, I'd probably put about an 8-foot high berm out in front of my gas station. I'd set it on top of there, then I'd have it.
That's
There you
super
go.
exciting.
You could do that.
Everybody uses Gas Buddy anyway, I don't know.
But anyway, I think that 6 feet is an unreasonable.
Well, that's what's in our current code right now.
Right, I understand that, but I
isn't
You know, not- I
Speedway's
didn't
6 feet?
anticipate
on
this.
4 mile? Speedway's is 6 feet, I can see that just fine.
At 4 mile? Yeah, it's not that high.
It's small.
Check that out when you drive.
but it's
by.
elevated.
It is.
It's
but not
elevated
that
from the
high.
street.
From the street, yeah.
Yeah, it's like 3 or 4 feet higher than the
It's
street.
part of the landscape.
They have a
That's what I'm
they
saying.
have a little bit of a thing over there.
Well, I'm just bringing the point up, that's all.
Should we do only 6 feet high from the mean average of the height of the Earth's surface?
Let's not start all that
No.
stuff.
If you're gonna, you should start with sea level.
Sea level.
Start there.
Okay, it's a good point, but I think one thing that would help though is sitting here talking about it, is just looking when we drive around, or if you have any examples of stores. We love examples.
I'll take a look at our portal library.
I know, but if
Why does John have to do a bunch of examples? Drive around town, you can see them.
Sean might have
Stop up to the
some
6 feet
stuff
way
in
on the 3
his
mile.
photo album.
All my
big city,
concern
though.
is whatever
Yeah,
we
he does. He
do,
gets to go to
whatever
big
we do
city.
for the speedway, okay, has applications for what happens at the corner.
You mean the shell? What we do for the shell,
shell.
is what we do at the
What-
corner.
What we're gonna do at the corner.
Right.
So, you know, you wanna try to get the signs down lower,
Mhm.
because the speed at the intersection's a little bit lower. You keep going higher and higher, kinda defeats the purpose of where we're all going with this. So, but I think the best thing would be to get a draft in front of you so you guys can start taking a look at it.
Then we
That's
can
the road.
argue about that. Yeah, discuss that.
Are there some of these signs that are like, they're like a calculator, they're kind of like gray in the background and black numbers on them?
They have,
Is that another
they
version
have,
of
they
that?
have, they have white letters, they have red letters, green letters.
I know what you're talking about, and yes, those exist.
They're not backlit, they're more of a reflective front lit like a conventional sign.
What are those? It's kind of like a nook.
Green and they've got regular red.
It's like e-ink. I don't know.
Yeah, it's more like an LCD.
I don't know what those are made out of. I'm not a sign genius. Yeah.
You know, like
You know, the one example that comes to mind right away is Walgreens. You know, they're putting a gallon of milk price up on the screen that flashes by. You're talking about prices of gas, prices of rooms. Well, where do you draw that line? I don't have the answer to that, but I mean, if you're
Right.
talking about pricing, there's another example right there.
Maybe Ace Hardware would like to see how much a nail costs. I don't know.
You could,
Keep it a gas station.
Then AutoZone's gonna say
You
how
wanna
much
keep
is
it
it.
Then
for
Advanced Auto
of
wants
oil.
one, and then
Yeah, and it just doesn't.
Tractor
end.
Supply Company comes back
They
in,
just stop.
you know.
Well, that's for practical safety. Okay.
All right, everybody.
Still zeros when they come
That was
to
my intent.
I'm so not good at whistling.
Okay, we're good to go.
We have enough information.
Can I throw a couple quick things
Yes.
in? I wanted to talk about the current sign as I look at it, drove by, it's very nice, it's not very bright, it has the Shell emblem. The Shell emblem is not very bright. Obviously, a new sign, I wonder if we regulate how bright that could be, you know, I've seen some of those that are kind of blinding. The proposed sign here had 24-inch tall letters, I think you saw that they were gonna eliminate multiple types of gas prices and use that space to have 24-inch tall letters, which is very tall, very big. I know you've all seen the flashlight effect, where you can have a certain number of lumens, a certain number of brightness, but if you condense that down into a point source, it very rapidly hurts your eyes. So you could even say that, hey, this new sign is no brighter than the old sign, but because it's a bunch of little LED lasers blasting at you, it can be very intrusive and annoying. The other question here is how Nikki is gonna measure this. And I think that we will have to measure it because a lot of these signs, up at that control panel, there's gonna be a knob where they can turn it up. So if you're gonna allow this, I think we need a way to measure it, and I think we're gonna have to do that down the road and in the future, because, you know, it's just, I'm gonna see the Buddy guys over there competing with the Shell guys on who can go brighter when nobody's looking, maybe. What else did I have here with this?
It talks, I have a question that concerns what you were talking about with brightness though. And I'm wondering if, you know, obviously it's something we could write in, but it talks in here about maximum brightness and the hardware is set and cannot be adjusted to exceed 1,000 to 1,500 nits, and only adjustments are for the nighttime mode where it can be adjusted to 5 to 20% of the maximum. This is done using the in-store controller, required a password to enter the factory setting. It's unlikely in the event of the photocell is disconnected or failed, the open sign will remain in night mode, which automatically makes it dim. So I don't know, is that something that we need to regulate it, or is that something that is factory standard in most signs and everything has to be set through a password code? Because then they couldn't just turn it up at random, like, you know, crazy 20-year-old employees couldn't just be like, hey, let's blind everyone.
Why is this knob down?
It's like disco.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that companies have to self-regulate.
I've got a note in here to look at evening cutoff. A lot of the signs require an evening cutoff. It's automatic. They dim at it in the evening. They go into dimmer mode.
Yeah, you can get, like
Like
this
a timer.
sign at my husband's business, you can get a photo cell that when the light goes down, the ambient light at dusk, then the light on the sign will raise for like a certain amount of time, or it can go the other way. Because ours isn't lit during the day. They have fancy sensors. I don't know.
Nikki, do you know, do they have any of these signs up at any of the other stations around town?
I could ask.
I want to say the Shell on
I just saw it, I don't know. what
South
street.
Airport
Yeah, South
and,
Airport.
they
They just redid it.
Where's the one?
Lafreniere,
Yeah,
Yes,
was it maybe?
that's where it's at. Yep.
Lafreniere has it.
I think the one on 14th does too, that little one with the car wash. at,
That's Marriage Mobile or whatever, Marriage.
South Airport and LaFreniere is right from the one that.
okay.
Well, why does everybody, while they're driving around, if you happen to stop and get gas, snap a picture of them, send them my way?
Picture, I've been doing it already.
Wow,
You're good.
okay. All right, well, we're gonna wait until we see something
Make sure you're
from
not
John.
driving when you're
We're
doing
gonna
it.
start thinking about it.
Working on it.
PC year-end report and 2015 projects for discussion.
What I need to find out from the planning commission. The planning, the year-end report is submitted to the board of trustees and summarizes what you did in 2015 and what you anticipate on doing in 2015, and that's what I wanted to ask the planning commission. Are there any initiatives that you are going to take a look at in 2015 so we can make the board of trustees aware of those?
Electronic signs.
That's
I'm gonna look at that huge water ordinance packet of water.
Stormwater ordinance.
Stormwater.
That's on the agenda for K to start talking, well, I guess that's more related to the form-based code, but, I'm kind of curious with the watershed center is the one that put out the big, thick stormwater ordinance. And that was as a result of deregulation by the county on doing stormwater enforcement. So that document was Nikki and I went to several meetings, worked on it, and now it's kind of stalled, I would say. And I think that part of the issue is they can't get to something that's just adoptable, which is what I think they would want, is the same document adopted by multiple entities, but like with us, I remember with us in Peninsula Township sitting in one of the meetings, and certain things that they do in Peninsula Township, I don't think we would have any interest in doing. So,
In East Bay Township went on their own. They went to the meetings also, they decided not to go with a joint ordinance.
right. So I guess where we're at with that right now, I don't know that I have a good answer.
So maybe what you would want to do is evaluate what ordinance that you're going to want to take a look at, continue with what we have,
I think it should be our goal
modify what we have, or,
to have a new stormwater ordinance adopted by the end of the year.
okay.
Yes.
You know, just as a reminder, the planning commission's role in stormwater runs up, I should say, it's within the zoning box. If it's a stormwater ordinance under the police power, the planning commission you have the ability to review and comment on some draft, but crafting one and that sort of thing is not, it's the township board. It's within the township board's power alone.
Right.
So if you want to incorporate it into the zoning ordinance, then it would be planning commission.
Currently, it's
Part
a
of the planning
police
commission.
power ordinance in
It's
our
a police
township.
power ordinance that was adopted by the township board. That ordinance came way back, back when the county proposed to have that
Which was-
unified ordinance that the drain commissioner operated.
3 years
I,
ago?
no, that was a long time.
Oh.
The original one, I
The
forget when,
original.
I remember it happening, but if it was 7 or 9 or something like that years ago. And everyone adopted the same ordinance. But it was the township board who adopted that, who reviewed and adopted that.
And then when
So-
they deregulated, we just kept that one. I remember.
Well, everyone had, it's an
Remember
ordinance.
someone came and talked to us and was like,
Kevin McElly, the drain commissioner, who used to run that program for county.
that was that who came and talked to us? Oh. Okay. Okay. But that being said, on the police power note is typically, just like with the events ordinance, typically we recommend things to the board and they review it because historically it seems that they don't take time to study and do work sessions on some of these things like we operate.
Yeah, I mean, it's more like recommending that they look at something and move forward with an amendment as opposed to, the normal procedure where you're, reviewing and modifying and all those things, and then you recommend approval to the township board, unless it's part of the zoning ordinance. But you could incorporate it into the zoning ordinance if you want.
What would be the benefit to do that?
But what would we incorporate? Just the version of the ordinance that we have? We just put it in our, then would it still be a police power ordinance, or you would get
No,
rid?
it's part of zoning.
You would get rid of the police power ordinance and then
Yeah.
incorporate it.
Mhm.
Of the townships that are around here, like
I
how
don't know
do
if anyone
people
has.
typically,
I don't know if anyone's incorporating those zoning ordinance, but I'll do a quick survey.
John, do you have any comments?
Up here, a lot of it emanated from the county. That's why a lot of the units of government have the same ordinance. In some other communities, it's either police power, some communities, they do have their zoning code. Depends on how they want to structure it. I'm finding a lot of zoning ordinances will have low impact development regulations in the zoning ordinance. They have stormwater outside as police power, but there's an interrelationship or integration there.
Right. Well,
Okay.
like we just got dinged on the kind of, I would say, separation between the police power ordinance and where we've gone with the zoning ordinance. So I guess my question would be, how do those two things interact with one another, in the sense that if Gosling Zuback is reviewing something for us and they're just using the stormwater ordinance as their guiding document?
Well, in the case of the advanced auto, actually I did not communicate that part of it to Clyde and the folks over at Gosling. I looked at the low impact as part of my site plan review. They looked at stormwater based on the ordinance. I've talked to them since, and when they take a look at storm, we're both gonna take a look at low impact.
Okay.
So it satisfies both the police power and the zoning part of the business district.
I would just say that with any of these changes that we've been making, like with the native landscaping, you try to keep it all in one place. And so that's, I don't know.
Well,
It's just something to think about,
I think what would
I guess.
happen is, because this is what happened on special events, is that if the planning commission recommends to the board that they need to incorporate like low-impact development guidelines in the stormwater ordinance, I would think the board would then recommend back to the planning commission and say, prepare that for us so we can review it.
Okay.
Right, Doug? The board of trustees isn't gonna spend the time,
Right.
nor should they, on that provision, but that's just how that interplay would go.
Okay.
So,
But would that not change the police order aspect of it then?
no, because what we'd be doing is basically, planning commission prepares a draft police ordinance with
Okay.
Jeff's, and then the township board, not the planning commission, is the one that takes the action and does all the adoption and stuff.
Is there a difference in the two on enforcement?
Difference between zoning and police power?
Not necessarily. You can apply the review standards the same, the municipal civil infraction standard the same, the ability to enforce the same.
What we can tell the board in the planning commission annual report is that the planning commission, with the board's support, would like to take a look at enhancing the stormwater ordinance, at least at this point, to include low-impact LID techniques and strategies. That's consistent with your master plan. You've got it built into your form-based code. It's just doing it on a township basis, but not changing a lot of your stormwater ordinance at this point in time.
Which document trumps the other, though? Like, if we're putting things into our zoning ordinance that are low impact development standards, right, in our form-based code. So we're making changes relating to something that is also governed by a police power ordinance in our township. To me, that seems that we shouldn't be putting any of that in the form-based code. We should be only recommending that the one guiding document on that subject be changed. Like, I'm trying to think of a good example. We wouldn't, the fireworks thing is in a police power ordinance, so we wouldn't be talking about fireworks in our zoning ordinance
No.
because it's regulated by.
And your special events is a police power ordinance.
Right, so I'm just pointing out to me.
You would want to put your LID in your stormwater ordinance.
And I think we should take it out
We should.
of other places in our.
But when we wrote the form-based code, there was still this thing, are
Yep.
we going with the watershed center or not?
Okay. Or we just put it all in the zoning ordinance. I don't care, it just, like, put it in one place. Which gets me to something I love to work on, is overall, I don't know how we do it, we've talked about this before, like sitting down and pretty much reading the ordinance, or starting to look at the structure of it, and doing some kind of, even if it's not that it's done this year, or by mid-year when our budget gets set for next year, having an idea of what we want to do with our zoning ordinance to make it more comprehensible.
Well, I think
Nikki
legal
agrees.
counsel would, yes.
Jeff, would you like that?
I think we all.
We all would like to do that.
I've said everything I'd like to
Well,
do for next year.
I mean, it's, lots of people write zoning ordinances. Planners do, zoning administrators do, lawyers do. It is a costly proposition, no matter who does it, frankly.
I'm not saying it needs to be rewritten, I'm just saying it needs to be consistent.
It can be reviewed for a number of purposes. You can sort of set up some, I could, or John and I could come and say, here's the things that maybe you should look at for a short-term review and, for consistency, for definitions, for just cleanup, or other reasons. And then what I would suggest is you probably would want to ask the township board to authorize the financing for that, because it's gonna be a big project. It takes a long, that's a big document. And it takes a long time to sort of parse it out into categories and find problems and correct problems.
Then
It was,
Potential time, hours, man hours, FTEs?
depends on what you wanna do.
Depends on.
Yeah, depends on the scope.
But I think that it's gonna take us time just to identify what the scope is. And we don't set our budget until mid-year, so we have 5 months right now to figure out just what the scope of it is for the following year to be actually doing the work. Does that make sense? Just identifying the problems is going to be a task in itself,
Well,
because we don't know what we need to do, we just know we need to do something.
I think Jeff and I have talked about this. I think we actually prepared a budget maybe a year or two ago. My opinion of the zoning ordinance is that there's a lot of provisions that are convoluted, that you're not gonna just go in and tweak it. If you're really gonna wanna do it, you basically have to revamp it. All I can remember is when I first did my first site plan review on Lautner Commons, when I prepared a flow chart of all the different provisions that they had to follow, there was like 50 boxes of different things that were all over the ordinance. It needs to be thoroughly redone. To bring it up to, and it needs to be less onerous for people to follow,
Yes.
which it is right now. It takes people getting used to how it reads and how everything interacts with each other.
There's also strange things in there that I think are definite relics of when the township ran differently. Like, there's references to things that I don't even understand sometimes. So, I do agree with your comment. Anyway, that's my opinion on what kind of work we need to do, which I know I'm not supposed to have opinions, but anybody else?
So there already has been you already looked at this at one point, give us some idea of.
Yeah, we did,
costs.
about a year or two ago, we did
Yeah.
for Jay.
The only opinion I have right now, Carly, is, we know what we're facing in terms of growth. To put a tire patch on this thing, to me, makes absolutely no sense. I think we have to take a look at the whole gross document and address it right now.
I think we would all agree with that, I guess,
I
okay.
understand that.
Let me
That's why
take
I
that.
asked if there was a budget.
Yeah, I can't speak for the board, but, or the commission, but the people who use it definitely feel that way. We just need, I think, to have meat behind what it is that we need to do so we can go ask for the money to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the group is a bit ahead of the curve instead of staying behind.
Yes. But we won't be able to have the money until the board approves it, and I doubt we'll get that this year because we didn't ask for it, right?
I mean, I don't know what the status of the budget is.
Yeah.
I mean, but you could propose it and they can tell you,
Yeah.
or
No, I
request
just
it and they can tell you whether there's available funds or not.
Okay.
They could say.
They could say yes.
I think they would take your advice.
How
I would
are
suspect
they
they'd take your
thinking?
advice.
They could say yes.
There used to be a checklist that the planning commission reviewed every month, and that's what I was just asking.
Yeah, I just put it,
Oh.
I put some, it's back on my desk.
It exists again.
It does.
It
It's
does.
all cleaned up and orderly and.
Yes.
There were, I don't know, there were 15 or 20 things on that checklist that were periodic, that was presented to the planning commission every month, and then was, recall check, you were around,
I was here, yep.
Steve,
But there's a bunch of the items on there she took off because we already did
because
them.
they were done.
Yeah.
But that's a good tool though,
Which-
to say, okay, maybe we should think about this, add to the checklist, then it
Right.
doesn't get lost in the,
Which, like, if we kind of
someone
get
mentions it at a meeting.
into the planning consultant phase of this, where you're gonna talk about the architectural requirements and the stormwater in the form-based code, segueing a little bit, but those would get on that checklist, or Excel spreadsheet, or,
Yeah, spreadsheet or whatever about that. Just quick, East Bay amended their stormwater ordinance in February of 2015. Garfield's ordinance is the same ordinance that you currently have, which is the ordinance that was adopted by all of the, or the majority of the county townships. When the drain commissioner operated it.
okay.
When was that?
When was it adopted? Let's see if they have a date on the Garfield one. Let me see.
I think they all did it in 2007. 13 townships adopted it.
Okay, other than the form-based code part, are there any planning issues that anybody has seen in the last year that they, Marcy?
When we were looking at the Tractor Supply and we were looking at their different plantings and tree numbers, and they said they had more trees than we recommended already, I think the number was 9. And I guess I thought in my mind, like 9 trees seemed like a lot until I saw that piece of property with what the minimum would have been. And then when the AutoZone was like refusing to do any more plantings of any kind, like I just think we need to look at what we're putting in for plantings and different things, truly what we want pieces of property to look at. Because if somebody's not gonna work with us, then we're just gonna get the minimum, and I don't think the minimum is really what anybody wants. I think it was just, you know, we were hoping that people would go above and beyond, but there are definitely people who won't. And as we go into development, let's make sure we have more trees and more shrubs than less.
Okay. Anyone else have chronic issues with? Any suggestions? And, okay. That being said, the year-end report, do you need assistance with that? Do you need any kind of movement on our part?
Nope,
on
I'll
that?
have it for you for February. I just need to know what to include as upcoming.
I think we
ideas.
want to take on some stuff.
Yes,
Okay.
I'll put that in there.
Nikki,
Yes.
do you have any kind of update that you would like to share?
I don't think I have anything. I issued permits for Advanced Auto the other day. And they're looking at March for demolition of the present building. So, that's all I have.
Okay.
Carolyn, any updates on Redwood Homes, the apartment complex?
Not yet. The engineer has not come back yet.
There's been some announcements of other apartment complexes in the area, like Hammond and 4 Mile, and I was wondering whether that kind of knocked them out of the...
I don't think so.
No,
I think
oh
they're
no,
still-
it's still moving forward. They just had a few changes they had to make and they,
Because originally they were talking about coming back the next month, and that was like 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
My understanding is that they're still working on it, and you may see something in a couple of months. Their timeframe just changed. They were a little bit more aggressive.
Because they wanted to start breaking ground in April or something.
Yeah, they wanted to start going in May, so, yeah.
I have a question. Is the Redwood development that's coming through presently, is that going to begin phase 2 of the VGT construction site?
Yes,
Okay.
that would be phase 2.
Which would be all the middle and south section, right?
Is that going to include more road work construction, like connector roads?
No road work, but they're gonna install sidewalks along Lager.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
part of the phase 2 requirements, that they'd be installing all the sidewalks along Lager Road.
But there wasn't going to be a connector road to, is it Mount Hope? Over the Acme Creek?
No, not that.
Tart Trail
no.
hasn't come in on it yet?
No, the Tart Trail is going through the Redwood project,
Correct.
okay?
Yes.
And then the Redwood project and the developers from VGT would install the sidewalks along the frontage per their discussion with the planning commission. And when the phase 2 project would start, then they had already dedicated the easement area for the sidewalks. Any phase 2 project, they would put the sidewalks in, so they'll be putting all that in plus the lanes.
So where does the Tart Trail go from there? Is it going to stop there at this time?
Yes. Well, no, it'll stop, it'll actually connect in with, if you want to take a look at the drawing, the Tart Trail will come through the property and will eventually, it'll connect in with the main drive where they have the trail, there's a pathway that they'll be building along the road. Okay?
Yes.
That goes out to 72?
Yeah.
There's the tunnel.
And then there'll be the tunnel.
And then the tunnel, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there going to be, speaking of the site plan, is that site plan going to be revisited?
Yep.
Yeah, it has to be.
It has
Yeah.
to be.
And it, the other thing too is, just based on what I heard tonight with the trolley, is that if that is a couple of years out and there is an opportunity, then if I were the developers, I would want to take a look at bringing that trolley line into DGT instead of on the outskirts of it.
What's the timetable on the site plan and the revisit of that? Have you heard?
No, I haven't. I mean, there's been so many other things that the developers are doing right now that I wouldn't anticipate we wouldn't see something in probably until spring on a revised concept. They're aware of it. We communicated that to them based on what the planning commission mentioned.
When we need that shift of density,
Yes.
that's the only project we could look at in there right now. until we see that
Revised site.
revised site plan from them. Other questions? I know this is super exciting. All right. Any other questions out there? So John, can we please have an update on this, or Jeff, both of you, on the whole architectural requirements, stormwater LID, the porous
Well-
pavement argument?
Well, the stormwater LID, I think I've already solved with Goslin Zubek. I mean, it wasn't, nothing on their end. It was just basically, I did not coordinate with them on the stormwater review. They looked at it based on the current ordinance, not incorporating LID. So that was a communication issue between the two of us. We've resolved that. I had a conversation with them. We're gonna take a look at that together from now on any project in the form-based code area. Regarding architectural standards, I left them out of the form-based code because those can be the most controversial in terms of dictating what you're going, how you're gonna have, what people have to do relative to the appearance of the buildings. But I understand, because I wasn't here in January, we had the guys from Advanced Auto saying that they didn't want to put up, or at the December meetings, they didn't want to put up the awnings. I can get with Jeff and we can incorporate some language into there that will give the planning commission a little bit more discretion in terms of those type of features, but I don't want to get to the point where a true form-based code actually has the architectural standards in it, the details, you know what I mean? Some of them are fairly specific in terms of what the buildings are going to look like, the materials that have to be used, the type of roofing materials, everything. You don't want to go that route. But we probably, based on our first case with these guys, we probably should have something, instead of using the word encourage, we probably should have some better language in there to give you a little bit more discretion to require things. And we can do that.
John, that's kind of the conclusion I came to after that meeting. The feeling that I got after we finished that one was, we had that language in there, where it was at discretion of the planning commission. It would make sense to me, because then, even though we're not building out a village at the intersection here, we can be more stringent in what we require. It just seemed kind of backward that we got what we wanted at Tractor Supply that's so far down 72, but the window that we're really trying to have the greatest impact on, we lost total voice and so that's the conclusion I came to before we met.
And we can have that suggested language to you for your next meeting.
Okay.
And one thing, going back to that advanced auto, one of the things I thought about was writing a letter to them about the awnings, because I think they're not correct in the cost of those awnings. I think they're 3 times higher than they actually are. You know, I've done it before, but I didn't want to argue with them on the cost of something in the middle of a planning commission.
Right.
So, and then I didn't want to overstep my bounds of doing research and doing a cost estimate for somebody else's awning in their project.
Yeah.
But that's one thing we could do is from the township, write them a letter asking them to reconsider the awning part of the aesthetics, and that the cost, we believe, will not be up to $15,000, but will be, you know, less than half of that. And to get them to reconsider, and at least getting quotes for those awnings. And I think they use the cost part as an excuse not to put them in.
They did in 2 different areas. If you look at the way that they did the quote that they used for the paving,
Yeah.
it wasn't just, I think it was it wasn't just the 9 spaces to the back.
Mhm.
They used that quote through the whole thing. So I just felt that the pricing was misleading to begin with, but we know it was kind of the same thing. You can't argue that point in the middle, other than to call them out on it. But if we're going to write a letter, their premise was that the cost to maintain the canvas awning was what was prohibited. That doesn't mean that they couldn't have a different type of product in there. I don't know how the cat's not already out of the bag. I don't know how you do shown face that they don't intend to comply with anything they don't have to. But I suppose writing a letter's better than not.
Yeah, after that meeting, I went up to the Upper Peninsula, talking about, you know, the awning issue and maintenance during snow. And I don't know, Marquette has tons of awnings, all over the place. They get, you know, as much or more snow than we do.
I have them on my house, I have no problem with them, they're over 5 years old.
Yeah.
And
So-
they're like brand new.
Or you do it like an aluminum, like a metal, I wasn't here for this whole
Yeah,
argument.
it's-
We want the Tassi's out of metal.
Right, which is no maintenance, you don't even have to shovel snow off of them because it falls off of them, so.
Spray them with silicone.
Yeah, that works.
We'll, propose some new language.
Yeah, and this is like, yeah, we heard this with Tractor Supply Company, you guys heard it last month. So people keep saying, well, why are we gonna do that? Because it's not technically in your ordinance. And it's like, all right, you guys asked for it, like, we're gonna put it in the ordinance now. So have fun. That's what I feel like it's gonna be like.
It's your ordinance.
I'm okay with it.
One thing I would say is, I don't know if John has thoughts on this or any of you do, but we're talking about canopies and awnings, but are there other, you know, you were leery about adding architectural requirements, but are there other architectural things that you think are important enough to create that additional discretionary standard?
Well, I think one of the things.
That's not my area of expertise.
One of
but
the things
we
I
could correct, we could correct canopies and awnings, and you could say next month, well, why don't we have the discretion to do this? So if there are other things you wanna.
There are, and one of
deal
the
with.
things I want to take a look at is the conversation that we had in November when they first came. I think Steve brought it up, about having an articulated facade. It was just a blank
I think we
facade,
both,
and there was the ability to have an articulated facade. That'll be another one of the requirements. And you always, on one of these you always are gonna get a project that is kind of like a test case, okay? And I'm more thankful that it happened with Advanced Auto that's on the corridor than on the corner. So it gives us an opportunity to evaluate what areas that we need to beef up. And actually, like I said, I stayed away from the architectural standards, primarily thinking that a lot of the applicants, like Tractor Supply, once they got into a discussion with the Planning Commission, would make those changes on a voluntary basis, but unless we.
That is new.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll take it.
Santa's here, he's way late. You cried.
Just a quickie here, I totally agree with John that it's great that Advanced Auto could be a learning experience that didn't hurt too bad. One of the things we talked about before with FBC was whether materials would be part of FBC, and I understand at Acme, I don't think materials were rigidly controlled there, and I cited that example of a housing development in Seattle that literally used corrugated painted materials, so perhaps you should look at whether materials maybe could be a little more controlled.
I know that we don't like a lot of, I guess, ambiguity. We like to outline things in the zoning ordinance, but if there was a way to say, you know, use awnings, articulated facade, something else, or other enhancing design elements or something. I mean, there might be some store that wants to put like a tower on it, or I don't know, something funky that. Put a giant bear
A mattress store
built
with a
into
mattress store and awnings.
I mean, but just to, or enhancing materials. I mean, if you have elements and materials and there's some combo of those, you can do a lot with those two things.
Well,
So-
the other one that I've got down that I want to take a look at is, it's interesting, mom and pop stores, you know, somebody locally, when they build a building or will do some really nice stuff, it's a lot of the franchises fall back on stuff like wall pack clay. Okay, we had that discussion with, oh, no, we gotta use wall pack. Well, in the form-based code, we can get rid of wall pack. we can say that wall pack would only be used like over a service entry door or
That's a good
or an
idea.
employee.
Instead of washing their building.
Instead of
We've had that
washing the building.
twice now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, we'll,
How to limit the boxiness factor, because there's things that I think we're learning that they all do. You would know better than us.
A lot of those franchise stores, they have a prototype design and specifications, and they don't want to go back and make any changes, because they know how long it takes to build it, they know what it's gonna look like, they know what it's cost, boom, here it is, and they just don't want to go through and change it.
yeah, and you know, I've got some, I should have taken more photos than what I did, but when I was in Chicago in December, I came across the Target in downtown Chicago that's on 2 stories. 2-story Target in their downtown, which totally blows the whole idea that they always have to be in
Right.
a suburban mall.
Downtown San Francisco, there's a 2-story Walgreens that has like the whole food mart in it.
Yeah.
And it was crazy good food at a Walgreens. It's really weird.
And it was the coolest thing. The picture I took of was mainly the technology. Was they had an escalator, and then they had an escalator for the carts. So when you were on the 2nd floor and you were shopping, you put your escalator into the escalator cart, and then you would take the one next to it, and the one for the cart had a special coupling on it, and the cart would stay totally level. And you were riding right alongside of it, and when you got down to the end, the cart came out, and you grabbed your cart and you took off.
Was there a sign like, don't leave your baby in the car? Please don't either.
It worked phenomenal. It really
That's
was
really
cool, the
cool.
technology on it.
Okay. I think that we're probably good. Anybody else? Any other, the one thing, Trey sent me these 2 low-impact development documents today, and I asked that Nikki print them out and leave them here for you. So I would take them home and read them. I think that you're right, was it in this one?
It's in the EPA question.
Yeah, in the EPA one, there's a part about hurdles, regulatory barriers and concerns. There's information in here talking about if it's really more expensive or not, how well some of these technologies work. So, do you have anything to add?
Well, based on what Advance came in with, where the whole parking lot, and they threw the cost number out and the whole 9 yards, and that was their dispelling thing. And then they brought up Traverse City's test scenario on 14th or post office. In the cold weather, that's not working. So I started doing a little research on it, and there seems to be there's some conflicting research basically going out there. But it seems like there are a lot on the East Coast, New Hampshire, Maine. They are using LID in cold weather, and it seems to be working quite well, or at least satisfactorily. And that was also, when they talk about the porous asphalt causing more maintenance, there's also studies that say, well, that also may reduce your snow removal costs because it melts snow better. So there's different readings that you could do that had different information.
Yeah.
And I just didn't think that we were really well prepared enough to take on that conversation.
On page 2 of the EPA one, with the parking lot, with the porous, with the permeable paving, that's what I had recommended for the advanced auto.
Right. As soon as when I saw that, then I was like, I knew
what I
exactly
had
where you were
thought.
coming from, and I just didn't have.
And I apologize for not being at the meeting too, but I wish I would have.
Because one of the things that they could have done instead of permeable paving is in the parking areas like this picture, where they're parking pavers, like you and I discussed before, have it, as a permeable surface with the crushed stone underneath it.
Exactly.
But then there are pavers on top,
Right,
so.
and then
it's a little
heavy
bit
duty asphalt for the maneuver.
for the rest of it,
maneuver.
and that way they don't have to, they can just sweep it off in the springtime, they don't have to vacuum it or anything like that.
Right.
So far, it's working pretty well up here at the resort, we haven't had any issues with that. So that could have been an alternative to that.
So it's good information for us
Very good.
Yeah.
as we start to be able to incorporate these technologies. Okay, so we'll open for final public comment at 8:52. We're now 14 minutes into the game. No, just kidding. Joke. No Ohio State fans? Okay. My friend is cooking duck tonight, if anybody wants to go get dinner. Any? No comments? Okay. Then the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
Timmons, Finch. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Good meeting, everybody. See, I can make